The last broadcast. The radio went silent, but the screams kept playing. The night it happened, I was wide awake. I always was. Insomnia had been my companion for years, and the only thing that kept the silence from driving me mad was Midnight City, the radio show that played between 1 and 3 in the morning. A voice in the dark, smooth and certain, carrying me through hours when the rest of the world was asleep. Her name was Valerie Crane. To her listeners, she was more than a host. She was a confidant, a secret keeper, a guide through the murk of the small hours. People phoned in with confessions, urban legends, ghost stories. She listened, asked questions, and sometimes just let the silence stretch until her caller filled it. But that night, the silence was different. It began at 1:47 a.m. She'd just finished reading a letter about a man who claimed his reflection whispered his sins back to him. Valerie laughed softly, the kind of laugh you couldn't fake. Then her voice shifted, brittle at the edges. "We have a call," she said, "coming through from a number I don't recognize." Static filled the line, broken by ragged breathing. For a few seconds it was just that. Inhale, exhale, harsh and uneven. Valerie asked, "Hello? Can you hear us?" Another long silence. Then something cut through that wasn't words but a sound that froze me where I sat. A scream, raw, strangled, like someone was being dragged under water. The line snapped dead. Valerie's mic crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling for the first time in all the years I'd tuned in. "We'll take a short break," but there was no break, no commercials, no music. Just static, stretching on until finally the broadcast went dark. I thought it was a glitch. Radio equipment failed all the time. But the next morning the forums were on fire. Dozens of listeners had heard the same thing, the breathing, the scream, the silence. Yet when the station uploaded the night's show to their archive, that part was gone. The file cut neatly from the strange caller to a cheerful outro, as though nothing had happened, and Valerie Crane was gone. The station issued a statement claiming she'd resigned suddenly for personal reasons. No forwarding contact, no farewell show. One night she was there, and the next she was erased, her voice snuffed out like it had never existed. But I knew what I'd heard. We all did. And once you've heard a scream like that, it doesn't let you go. For days I tried calling the station. No one picked up. I emailed the producer listed on the website, only to have it bounce back. Invalid address. It was as if the entire show had been scrubbed from existence. Then, 1 week later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name scrawled in black marker. Inside was a cassette tape, unlabeled except for 3 words scratched into the plastic. "Play at midnight." I stared at it in my hand, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. No one knew I listened to that show. No one should have known where to find me. The tape player clicked as I pressed it down. A hiss of static, then Valerie's voice. Not the polished, easy tone of her broadcast, but urgent, cracking with fear. "They're listening," she whispered. "If you hear this, don't trust the silence, the screams." The tape cut off, that was all. Just her voice, broken, and a warning that felt less like a message and more like a curse. And I knew then that Valerie Crane hadn't resigned. She had vanished, and someone wanted me to be next. The cassette haunted me. I played it over and over as though repetition would reveal some hidden layer. Each time, Valerie's voice sounded more fractured, more desperate, and the way she cut off, mid-sentence, like something had snatched her from the microphone, made my skin crawl. By the third listen, I noticed something else. Under the hiss of static, beneath her words, there was a faint hum. It wasn't natural. It pulsed in a rhythm too steady, too deliberate. When I slowed the tape, the hum became clearer, a sequence of tones, rising and falling like coded signals. I'd once been a journalist before sleepless nights and too many unsolved stories pushed me out of the field. Old habits resurfaced quickly. I recorded the hum on my computer, ran it through an analyzer. It wasn't random. It was coordinates, a stretch of woodland on the edge of town. I hadn't been there in years, not since covering a missing hiker, case that was quietly closed with no evidence found. That hiker's name flashed through my memory now, linking itself to Valerie in a way I couldn't yet explain. The woods were desolate when I arrived. The air carried that strange stillness, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. I followed the GPS to a clearing where an old broadcast tower jutted from the earth like a skeletal finger. Rust consumed its base, cables snaking into the dirt. The place looked abandoned, but I knew better. Towers like these never truly went silent. They hummed with invisible life, their signals crossing unseen paths above our heads. At the base of the tower, half buried under dead leaves, was another cassette, wrapped in a plastic bag, labeled only with the same jagged handwriting. 2. My pulse thudded. Whoever was leaving these tapes wanted me to follow. And I was. I slid the tape into my player right there, kneeling in the dirt. The voice that emerged wasn't Valerie's this time. It was male, low, strained, as if speaking through clenched teeth. "They're using the airwaves," he said. "Not just for voices, for control. They slip into the static, into the silence between words. She found out. They couldn't let her stay on the air. Now she's..." A crack, like a fist hitting the mic. Then silence. I sat frozen, the tape hissing emptily. My hands shook as I rewound it, but the message ended the same way every time. Behind me, branches cracked. Footsteps. I turned, but the clearing was empty. Just trees stretching endlessly, their shadows long and sharp in the fading white. Still, the feeling of being watched pressed heavy on me. Whoever had left the tape might still be here. I drove home with the player still in the passenger seat, as though proximity to the evidence could anchor me to reality. But as the sun dipped, the doubts came crawling. Why me? Why send the tapes? To me of all people? Unless they knew I wouldn't stop digging. That night, I couldn't resist. I tuned my old radio to the frequency where Midnight City once lived. The dial crackled, dead air humming faintly. Then, at exactly 1:47 a.m., the static shifted. Not into a voice, but into a series of short, clipped bursts. Morse code. I scribbled, frantically, translating each dot and dash. It spelled 2 words. Help me. The pen slipped from my hand. Valerie's voice echoed in my skull, that broken whisper from the first tape. Don't trust the silence. And then, cutting through the static, I heard it again. The same scream that had frozen me a week ago. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was inside my apartment. The scream tore through my apartment so real it rattled the glass in the windows. I spun toward the kitchen, the living room, every shadow alive with menace. But the place was empty, silent. The radio still hissed on the desk, static rising and falling in uneven waves. My heart pounded as I leaned closer, certain the sound had come from there. Yet when I replayed the recording I'd just made of the frequency, there was nothing. No scream, just silence. Someone wanted me rattled, and it was working. I tore through the apartment looking for answers. Windows locked, door bolted, no signs of forced entry. Yet on the floor by my desk lay something that hadn't been there before. A third cassette. No envelope this time. Just the tape, black plastic gleaming faintly in the lamplight. My stomach twisted as I slid it into the player. Valerie's voice, weak, urgent. If you're hearing this, I'm running out of time. They're not just listening, they're transmitting. Slipping into thoughts, steering them. That night the caller wasn't human. It was a test. And I failed. The recording cut off in a shriek of static, so loud I ripped the headphones off. I sat there, shaking. Valerie was alive, or at least she had been when the tape was made. But what did she mean by not human? I didn't want to believe it. This had to be human. Corruption, manipulation, maybe some government experiment with signals, something rational. Yet deep down, unease gnawed. Sleep was out of the question. I spent hours cross-referencing everything I had. The coordinates, the tapes, the broadcast time. Patterns emerged. Every anomaly, every scream, every strange interruption lined up with the tower's transmission cycle. At 3:12 a.m., it happened again. The radio flared with static, then a faint voice emerged beneath the noise. Not Valerie's this time, but male, the same strained tone from tape 2. "Stop searching," it said. "She's already gone, before you disappear too." The voice dissolved into a hum that drilled into my skull. I yanked the power cord from the wall, plunging the apartment into silence. But the hum remained, low and insistent, vibrating in my teeth. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed water on my face. That's when I saw it in the mirror. For the briefest second, my reflection didn't move with me. It lagged, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. I staggered back, heart hammering, and when I looked again, the mirror was normal. Just me, pale and shaking. I couldn't stay here. Not with the walls pressing in, not with the air vibrating like it carried voices I wasn't meant to hear. I grabbed my bag, stuffed the tapes inside, and drove. The highway was empty, the world outside my windshield a blur of shadow and distant lights. My mind kept circling back to Valerie's last words. The caller wasn't human. What if she wasn't speaking in metaphor? By dawn, I found myself parked in front of the station where she had worked. A low building, unremarkable, its sign flickering weakly in the early light. It looked dead. But from somewhere inside, faint and steady, came the hum. The same rhythm, the same code. And I realized then that Valerie's voice wasn't just a warning, it was a map. She was still out there. And if I wanted answers, I'd have to step into the silence she'd been swallowed by. The station looked like nothing more than a husk when I approached, its windows clouded with dust, its front door chained shut. The kind of place kids dared each other to break into on Halloween. But the hum, that low thrumming signal, slipped through the walls like a pulse. I circled the building until I found a side entrance, the lock broken long ago. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and burnt wiring. Peeling posters of long-dead bands curled on the walls. Yet the deeper I went, the stronger the hum grew, vibrating through the soles of my shoes. The main broadcast room was stripped bare, consoles gone, chairs overturned, cables trailing like veins cut from a body. But on the desk in the center of the room sat a single object, a cassette player, another tape inside. I pressed play. Valerie's voice spilled out, but it was distorted, warped, as if something else was bleeding through her words. They won't let me stop. Every night the show was theirs, not mine. Every laugh, every silence, they fed on it. The screams, those were real. They make us their transmitters. A crackling burst cut her off, replaced by the same male voice from before. Enough. Stop chasing ghosts. The more you listen, the closer they get. I froze. This wasn't a recording anymore. The voice was live. The overhead lights flickered. The hum rose, drilling into my skull until I staggered back, clutching my ears. Shadows thickened in the corners of the room, and for a breathless instant I swore I saw them. Figures, faceless and shifting, their outlines quivering like static caught in human form. The door behind me slammed shut. Panic surged. I ran, slamming my shoulder into the door until it burst open, spilling me into a narrow hallway. The hum chased me, vibrating in the walls, in my chest, in the fillings of my teeth. I stumbled through stairwells and corridors until I burst into the basement. That's where I found it. Rows of filing cabinets lined the room, drawers hanging open. Inside were stacks of tapes, each labeled with names I recognized. Callers, listeners, people who had once been voices in the night. Some names were crossed out, others had question marks beside them, and then I saw mine. A folder, my name scrawled across it in the same jagged handwriting as the tapes that had arrived at my apartment. My stomach turned to ice. I flipped it open. Inside were pages of transcripts. Not just the words I'd spoken online years ago as a journalist, but thoughts I'd never shared aloud. Private moments, fears, even fragments of dreams. They had been listening to me long before I ever tuned into Valerie. A sharp click echoed behind me. Footsteps descended the stairs, sheriff's boots, black and heavy. And then he was there, blocking the exit. his face set in stone. But his eyes hummed with the same static shimmer I'd seen in the shadows. "You should have stayed asleep," he said, his voice carrying two tones now, his and something layered beneath. "Curiosity makes you loud, and we need silence." The hum swelled, shaking the cabinets, rattling the tapes until they spilled across the floor. My vision blurred, my body threatening to give way under the weight of it. But through the roar, one thing became clear. Valerie hadn't just been warning me. She'd been leaving me a trail. And the final piece of it was still here, buried among the evidence they'd hidden. I had one chance to find it before the silence claimed me too. The sheriff's footsteps drew closer, each one pounding in time with the hum rattling my skull. My hands shook as I rifled through the mess of spilled tapes, cabinets groaning as if the building itself wanted me gone. One tape caught my eye. Its label smeared but still legible. "Final show. Do not air." I snatched it up, fumbling to shove it into the cassette player on the desk. The sheriff lunged, his voice warping with that double tone. "Don't listen." Click. Valerie's voice filled the basement. This time it wasn't frantic. It was steady, resigned. "If you're hearing this, they found you. They always do. But you still have a choice. Every voice they consume, every silence they enforce, it strengthens them. But if you broadcast their hunger back at them, if you let the world hear the truth, they break." Static crackled, swelling until it felt like the walls would burst. Shadows writhed, the air thick with them, trying to smother the sound. I grabbed the battered microphone on the desk, its cord dangling into nothing, and pressed it against the speaker of the cassette player. The hum shrieked, twisting in on itself, feeding on Valerie's words as if choking on them. The sheriff screamed. No, they screamed, his body flickering with jagged bursts of light like a human-shaped transmission tearing apart. And then, silence. Not their silence. Real silence. Heavy. Still. Absolute. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, the tape spinning to its end with a hollow click. The sheriff was gone. The shadows had retreated, leaving only the scattered mess of tapes across the floor. I should have left them there. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I gathered as many tapes as I could carry. Valerie's final words echoed in my mind. Broadcast their hunger back at them. Now, every night, I play the tapes. I upload them, scatter them across forums, podcasts, anywhere someone might listen. Every scream, every distortion, every warning Valerie left behind, it all goes out into the world. I tell myself I'm finishing her work. I tell myself I'm fighting them. But sometimes, when the recordings end, I hear whispers in the static of my own speakers. Not Valerie's voice. Mine. And I wonder if in trying to destroy them, I've only made myself their newest transmitter.